Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Terry James Gingrass, and this is Dr. G's ADHD Chat. This is a show trying to make the world safe for ADHDers. I am a clinical psychologist and neuropsychologist. I am in private practice. I spend about half of my time, I guess, maybe a little more, doing ADHD work, testing, treatment, that sort of thing. I also am the parent of an ADHD adult, and at the time my ADHD adult was a child, I was a young, inexperienced psychologist, and the world didn't really know that much about ADHD. As I'd say probably every week, I went through an APA, American Psychological Association, certified program, and I never once heard about ADHD. I mean, the whole time I was there, no ADHD. And so when it became obvious to both my wife and I that there was something going on with this young man that we didn't really understand, it was hard to find anybody who knew anything about it. I had a couple of friends who had done pediatric postdocs, and they couldn't help. So I did what you do. Being a psychologist, I had access to literature, research, journals, all that kind of thing, and webinars and conventions and all that. And so I became a student of ADHD, basically. Now I'm happy to say there's a lot more information out there, and the treatment options are better. Although now we have a lot of people who would rather that the most effective treatment options did not get used because they scare them, and that's a problem, and I think it's going to be more and more of a problem as things continue. We seem to have a strong strain of anti-scientific thought in this country at the moment, and I will not go any further than that because I'm already probably in more trouble than I need to be. But we know there are effective methods of treatment. We know there are effective methods of assessment and evaluation, and we know how to treat things better, treat ADHD better. We know ADHD is a genetically transmitted disorder. It runs in families. The heritability index is incredibly high. That means if you have a child with ADHD, you better start looking to your own background and your spouse's background, because there are almost 100% some ADHDers in the background. And so ADHD is not caused by poor diet, poor parenting, poor environment, none of that stuff. Okay, ADHD is something you're born with. As near as we can tell right now, it's a slight difference in the way your brain metabolizes norepinephrine and dopamine. Okay, that's kind of fancy sounding, but those are the two neurotransmitters that help you concentrate, help you stay focused. But the big, so ADHDers are not brain damaged or stupid or crazy. There's a great book out that's been a classic for decades called You Mean I'm Not Lazy, Crazy, or Stupid? It's written for ADHDers, and that's a lot of what they're told. Okay, when I do an assessment, I get feedback from the teachers and parents and that sort of thing, and I get a lot of, he's a bright boy, but if he just concentrated, he could do so much better. If he could concentrate, he wouldn't be here. He can't concentrate. And that's increasingly what we see as a problem. You've got an ADHD or who's a perfectly capable individual, but who's in a system that is extremely difficult for him or her to function in. Our school system is set up for compliant, eager, everybody sits in the front row kind of folks. And if you possess an ADHD attention span, that's going to kill you. I mean, the whole thing. In my area, there are teachers who basically give 50% credit for just getting assignments done on time. It's like, really? What has that got to do with training, instruction, brilliance, anything? It's got to do with compliance. It's got to do with doing what you're told, period. So I emphasize that because that leaves parents with a big job. You've got to teach your child how to get by, how to survive in a system that's totally not designed for his brain type or her brain type. Okay? You've got to teach them how to handle the fact that a teacher is going to expect that you do assignments on time, and it is not going to matter that you have extraordinary difficulties with that are not willfulness, but are as a result of your neurology, and they are going to have to learn how to handle that. Your kids are, and that requires that they be extraordinarily resilient, that they can take the slings and arrows of not quite fitting in and not let themselves get anxious or depressed, which is frequently occurs with ADHD kids, particularly if they're not treated. Your job as a parent is to teach them that they have talents and they have gifts and they have abilities. They may not necessarily be what the school is looking for, but that isn't the only measure of your self-worth. So, as a parent, you need to be reinforcing. By that I mean encouraging. It actually comes out of industrial psychology, but it's called the Lasota rule. And basically, it was a lot of research done on what made people more efficient and effective. And they found that if there were about 4 complimentary statements, positive statements, to every one critical statement, that was optimal, and that would make the group of people the most efficient, the most effective that they could be. Now, I don't know about you as a parent, but I know I, as a parent, probably had a hard time ever meeting that criteria. The 1 in 4 is hard. You got to have 4 positive things for every 1 critical one. Okay, and we're not set up that way. Society's not set up that way. Okay, schools, they focus on the errors you make. Most of us in parenting focus on when things go wrong, when behavior isn't what we expect, that sort of thing. We spend very little time praising or a positive behavior, except, in the big ones, when they graduate or when they get a scholarship or that sort of thing, or they make the all-star team or whatever. Then they get all sorts of reinforcement and positive stuff. But day to day, not much. And you've got to be aware of that, because that makes a huge difference. It also makes a huge difference in your relationship with your child as a parent. Okay, if you are just seen as the critical one, you're going to be very distant. Okay, if you are one who has at least a mixed bag of criticisms and compliments, your relationship will be better. I mean, it's just, I know it sounds simplistic, but it works that way. Okay, if you are constantly telling your kid not to do that, or what's the matter with you, why are you, and what's the matter, that is not going to lead to a positive relationship. That's going to lead you to being very distant from your child, and probably your child leaving home and staying away as soon as he or she can. Okay, and that's not good. That's not good, because your ADHD child probably needs you more than a neurotypical kid. Okay, because remember, ADHDers are about 3 years behind in terms of maturity relative to a neurotypical kid. So, following the Lesotho rule, and actually keep track of it. I mean, when you are trying to start a new habit, one of the best ways you can do is to start monitoring it. Get yourself a little 3x5 card and make a tick mark every positive comment you make, and see how you do at the end of the day, and an X for every negative one. Okay, so we got to keep track of both of those. That's real important. And the other thing is, you have to look for strengths in your child. Okay, now I'm not asking you to do my job and be a psychologist, but I do think you need to be looking, what is he or she good at? Okay, everybody's got a strength area. Everybody's got something they're a little better at than other folks. Might be sports, might be arts, might be music, might be getting along with people, making friends, buying and selling. I don't know. You've got to pay attention and keep track of that and encourage that. Now, my ADHD child was a born salesman. I mean, I don't even remember how young he was, but it was young, maybe 6 or 7 years old. From that time on, we never knew which toys were his, because we'd see something we didn't recognize, and it's like, where'd this come from? Oh, I traded that with Billy for and he was constantly doing that, and that was, I think his natural strength area, and it was right from the get-go, right from the beginning. When he wasn't even quite in Little League yet. He sold his brothers Little League candy. Going door to door and selling candy. They were using that to, get money for the league, but he did it because it was fun. He liked doing it. And his brother would rather take a beating than knock on a stranger's door or even a neighbor's door. He just did not want to do that and ask them for something. Heaven forbid. Okay, so you look for natural strengths and you encourage them. They're good at sports, let them play. Don't use that as the punishment. You've got to let them have an area where they can shine, where they can be better than the other kids, because they spend a lot of time hearing that they're not as good as the other kids. Okay, so look at their strength areas, encourage their strength areas. If it requires more training or more equipment or whatever, I highly suggest you buy what you can afford, obviously, but the earlier they can start to do things that are pleasing to them and maybe end up having some value. I have lots of patients with ADHD who basically were in business from the time they were about 14 on, because they knew how to do certain things. One kid was great with computers, could do anything. He could make them talk, sing, tap dance, whatever. He could do it with a computer, and he actually got a lot of business helping small businesses with their computer problems. And he's just a kid. He had to get driven to wherever he was going to meet up. Excuse me. That is, that's a huge thing. A huge, very important thing to do is to encourage their strengths. Do what you can and show an interest. Hopefully some of the things they're interested in are things that one of you, either you or your spouse, is interested in. So do things like that together. Because you need some kind of activities where you're not always correcting them, okay? Because you do not want to be, you have to do it. You have to establish a basic level of responsibility and all that, but you do not want to have them expecting every time you open your mouth it's a criticism. That's a real negative relationship, and it'll cause you problems later on in life. Okay, and they need to understand that other people's opinions are not that important. Okay, that everybody's got an opinion, but that doesn't make them right or wrong or accurate. You want to set up a situation where their strengths are recognized. You encourage their strengths, and you minimize the criticism. You have to, ideally, you're going to want them to graduate from high school. Ideally, I don't know about past that, but at least high school. Although, when we get through all this stuff with the pandemic and that sort of thing, I'm not sure how things are going to be. Already, most colleges, kids don't graduate without having taken several courses online. And I think that could increase even more. Already there are enough programs out there that allow you to get a bachelor's degree, a master's degree. I even think there are one or two that do a PhD online. And as far as I know, companies are still accepting those. So you can mess up, but still get an advanced education. Mess up in public school and still get an advanced education. So it's not as critical as it used to be. Okay? And not every kid's going to get into Harvard. And Lord knows, maybe some of us would just assume they didn't get into Harvard. That's personal opinion, just going with that. But you can expect that your child will be able to continue his or her education pretty much regardless of what they did in elementary and high school. Okay, but they do need to graduate or even get a GED, because with a GED you can get into most of these online programs. So, but you want your child to be resilient, to be able to make a mistake and correct it and keep going to the goal, to trip and stub his toe and all that stuff and get right back up and keep going. And that comes from you encouraging, insisting actually on that they don't quit, that they don't give up. Because it's real easy for an ADHD kid to just, I can't, this is too much, I can't do it. You've got to encourage them. Okay, you've got to reassure them. And you got to keep them moving forward. That's going to be their resilience. And that's what they're going to, basically to survive as an ADHDer, you have to be somewhat resilient. But you want to encourage that and reward it. Okay, well, that's me for today. I'm Dr. Terry James Gingrass. I can be reached at terrygingrassphd.com, or you can drop a message or a question down either down there or over there. I'm never sure which. And ask me some questions. Tell me what you'd like me to talk about and that sort of thing, and we'll get right on it. Okay, we will catch you next time then.